As a child, I was brought up in back street in the central areas of Birmingham, a place called Hockley, Hockley Brook. But the brook was a sewer, in fact. And so this backyard was our playground. It was hard paved, blue bricks, and we had 6 lavatories to share. We were poor. I had hand-me-downs until I was 14. Funniest thing, though, that some of the neighbours were even poorer than us, and it's hard to imagine now, because I had my backside hanging out most of the time. But we lived in this area, which was terribly, terribly overcrowded, in bloody awful conditions. And people were expected to live a full life. And when we talk today about the quality of life, and you look at what we existed in those days, I just, I don't understand how people can argue now that they're not better off, because by God, we were in a mess. In the spring, we had this eternal battle that my mother used to get a jar of paraffin and used to strip all the beds down and used to brush, and we used to join in this job, brushing the bedpost and all the joints on the beds, and then spraying the walls with paraffin. And of course, everybody in the area used to do this. So there was a constant battle between the neighbours, spraying the paraffin to keep the bugs down, to lock them in. If you could spray harder than your neighbour, they got the bugs and you didn't. If you were a week late in spraying, you got the bugs and you really had them. And this was one of the problems, but this was a sort of constant battle. One of the things about the people in the area, this always sticks in my mind, is it wasn't the people that were dirty, it wasn't the people that brought the bugs, it was just these bloody awful buildings that were outdated, old, and never should have been allowed to remain for as long as they had remained. All the promises that were made by the politicians that something would be done about it, but never anything was done about it. Anyway, as a child, growing up and watching my mother struggling in these awful conditions with other women, other families struggling in the same way, decent, honest people struggling against terrible conditions, I made up my mind that I wasn't going to live in a situation like that when I grew up, and I wasn't going to bring my family up in a way like that. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to stand for the council when I was a young man. I fought to get onto the council. I was lucky I got on first time. But I remember my speech to the people in the area that if I got elected to the council, we would struggle hard to bring some green grass growing in this area that hadn't seen green grass for God knows how long, and that we would knock down these bloody awful buildings and give them a chance to live in a decent way, as they deserved, because they were decent people.
Sir Frank Price, former Lord Mayor, remembers his childhood in Birmingham. But his own personal crusade for a better city and for a better life for the people who live in it is just one of a long line of crusades in a city that has always needed them. Ever since the beginning of Birmingham, people have argued and complained and even wept over it. And for 100 years, most of the arguments and just about all the complaints have poured into the ears of the men who edited the local paper, the Birmingham Evening Mail. The latest of that long line of men, Frank Owens.
Now, I'm sure I can truthfully say that this newspaper has always been about people, concerned about people. We, the Mail, today, share the faith of our predecessors. It is this, that if Birmingham puts its mind to anything, it can damn well do it. Our purpose, obviously, is occasionally to attract its mind to what it should be doing. And here I think there's been a significant change in society, and it's a very important one, and one that I think local newspapers, above all, should always have in mind. And it springs, I think, from the inhuman size and complexity of modern institutions and organizations, central government departments, local government departments, trade unions, some trade unions, big industrial undertakings, all the paraphernalia and apparatus of the mass administrative state in which we live today. Perforce, we can do nothing about it. It's here and we have to live with it. But it's so powerful and so overwhelming and so complicated that I think the individual is in danger of becoming a digit, a cipher, a unit in somebody's register. And so I believe that all authority needs to be kept under constant scrutiny. And this newspaper should do by constant probing, questioning, endless questioning. We should never let go.
Years ago, 20,000 Birmingham children ran the streets or worked in factories. Their present desperate, their future uncertain. And it was a Birmingham man, George Dixon, who led the national fight for public education. Today, nearly 200,000 youngsters attend the city's 500 schools. And perhaps the spirit of George Dixon lives on in teachers like John England.
Of how a shepherd had a lot of sheep, and he lost one of them, and when he found it, he was very, very happy. Now, we haven't lost a sheep because we've only got cats and rabbits and hamsters and goldfish, but we did lose one of our little friends who was brought to me by one of our boys and who's been let loose in the garden. But he disappeared, and we thought we'd lost him. And then suddenly he came up in a class, and that made a few people jump. Do you know who I'm talking of, or what I'm talking of? Yes. Well, we lost him, but he's come back, and I brought him in to say good morning. Would you like to see him? Yes. Come on then, little snake. Here you are. No, you don't. No one's going to hurt you, little snake. Here he is. All small and wriggling. He's had a drop of milk this morning, so he should be all right. And he's got a long... Can anyone see his tongue sticking out? Yes. Well, I wanted to bring him in to show you, because look, he's got a very, very thin tail. And you can't see him very easily. So when you go into the garden, will you watch where you tread? Because if you trod on the poor little fellow, you'd hurt him very much. I've been teaching in this kind of school. You'd probably call it a slum area, but we have fancy names for that sort of thing now. We call it an inner ring area or a deprived area. But I've been teaching it now 41 years. I shall soon be retiring. I must say, looking back on 41 years of frustration, it's remarkable what we've achieved. This school replaces a very old building built nearly 100 years ago in a shocking area. The houses weren't fit to pen cattle, whole families in one room. They talk about teaching sex, you know. One of my little girls of 11 came to school when she'd helped to deliver a baby for her mother the night before. Well, Dad rushed out to get help. What they saw and knew, well, they had a corpus of knowledge that could instruct me. But we've a very good progressive council here, and although upset by the war years, they have stamped this out. You look round you see a plain. I won't say a desert because houses are going up. They've wrecked the houses, they've carried them away, and they built this new school which is an absolute gem. I've never seen anything like it, and it's just one instance of what it's doing, and it makes it a real delight to finish one's course after all the disappointments and struggles on such a note. But in the last analysis, you know, it's going to be a teacher in a classroom facing children.